Welcome to Automotive EV and our latest Industry Insights session. Today's session, we have great speakers, and I'm very fortunate to welcome Parham again to moderate the session. And so because we're running, I think, fractionally behind, it's over to you, Parham, and thank you all for being part of it.
Thank you very much, Peter. Really delighted to run again one of our Leadership Insights session. Here, really, I'm even more excited because we have two amazing panelists with a lot of experience in the field of what we would like to address today and explore. But at the same time, I really encourage everybody to see what they can take away from this and then really try to implement in their own leadership style, as well as for the organization. So today we want to talk about how things such as mindfulness can nurture and support collective intelligence. We all know that we cannot run product development, we cannot run product strategy creation, we can't run design thinking as we did traditionally. So new models of working came into the domain, things like agile, where we have to a little bit not only try to work more iteratively and be a little bit more risk averse than before, but also it requires a lot of collaboration, cross-functional, multidisciplinary exchange between teams. So today we want to explore this subject and see how these cognitive and mental capabilities, but also how concrete tools and frameworks can help teams and organizations to be not only functioning better, but also be much more productive and creative on this journey. So with that, I would like to hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Thank you very much, Parham. This is Christian Greiser speaking. I'm an executive coach. I would say I help decision makers, entrepreneurs, and management teams with critical personal and leadership questions. I've myself managed large organizational units for almost 20 years, have developed generations of leaders, I would say, at my former employee, and would regard myself to be an executive coach out of passion. Before this job, I've worked for 20 years for the Boston Consulting Group, most recently as a senior partner and global leader of the operations practice, and I'm an engineer by training. I'm very happy to be here today.
Thanks, Christian and Parham, for kicking off the subject. I'm Jan-Philipp Martini. I'm a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. I'm specifically focusing on agile transformations as well as leadership development. And I'm also a mindfulness trainer. And that brings me to connecting these topics of transformation and mindfulness within BCG, where I run a lot of mindfulness trainings for the internal BCG community, but also for clients. And I'm meditating myself since 11 years. And I'm also an engineer like Christian by background. I was originally working in suspension system development for a small sports car company, and now I'm with BCG and a mindfulness trainer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction. I mean, both of you know I'm very excited about this subject. We worked together previously, but today, of course, I will also ask some challenging questions and try to look at this very, very critically. I mean, again, I made some examples during these sessions and during this event about, January World Economic Forum in Davos. It's the decade of action. We want to make sure we achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So there is a lot of pressure on the entire industry, not only automotive, but also the stakeholders around us to make sure we work together to achieve this. Now, of course, COVID-19 comes into the game and it's really a new reality. So Christian, can you explain a little bit how does, for example, your clients and business leaders experience this new reality? And what challenges do you see they are facing?
Yeah, you just mentioned it a bit. I think when we talk about this topic, I think we first need to start a bit with the context. So I see it in a way that we're currently experiencing challenges at three levels, I would say. There's the one level, which I would call the environmental level, which is everything around climate, and you could even say the pandemic falls into that. Then I see a second level, which is more social, geopolitical, which I see is everything around technology, digitization, algorithms, which is changing society But this is also the trade conflicts we are talking about. And then to me, there is a third level, that is the individual level. It's almost the spiritual level, if you want. That's the question of purpose. People asking themselves. That's connected a bit. And that's a big question which is coming up with the millennials. Now, this world, I feel, calls for a new leadership style for 3 reasons. The first reason is very simple. In this world, managers don't have all the answers. And so they need to foster collective intelligence to find the answers. And second, in order to win, adapting to this new environment, it's not enough that companies try to adapt. I think they need to shape the environment. And this requires unleashing imagination, to think beyond today. And third, I think this is the big challenge. Leaders need to manage dilemmas. They need to deliver on profit and on purpose. They need to ensure speed and depth. And they need to manage distance and proximity. And to make this happen, to me, it's pretty clear that the classic command and control leadership style doesn't work anymore. I see very successful examples of some of my clients where, for example, leaders acting much more as coaches, asking more questions than providing answers, and thereby unlocking people's potential to come to the real power. Or companies establishing a learning culture and helping their employees to develop a growth mindset, as we typically say, which is very different from what we have done in the past. I can also see clients, or some of my clients, actively encouraging imagination or reimagination by fostering reflection, or by encouraging much more experimentation, being open to experiments. But I see also companies, and this is also what we are talking today, making some experience in the corporate mindfulness area, and thereby not only managing resilience, but also driving collective intelligence and to foster cognition and creativity.
That is great. And I mean, in my area, autonomous driving and trying to build ecosystem, trying to deliver these large-scale complex products, I can really resonate with what you just said. I mean, bringing agile into the organizations, into the team, obviously doesn't go without friction as well. And that is both, I think, from a productivity point of view, but also when we look at kind of the social well-being of teams. So I was even more excited, of course, a couple of years ago to learn that you have also your own mindfulness practice, as I have also now for many years. What role do you think this mindset, these tools, this approach, which mindfulness brings with it, plays in this new reality? And what can leaders do to approach it from a more mindful and positive way?
Yeah, I think I see the relevance in 2 dimensions. First is about leading yourself, and I think it's about leading others. And when we talk leading yourself, I think it's very much about resilience, a topic we talk very often today. It's about cognition and imagination, what I just mentioned. Resilience, we wrote a report in that, and which we published a couple of months ago on LinkedIn. I think the basic notion is with mindfulness, what we typically say, you cannot change what's happening around you, but what you can change is how you react to it. I think this describes it very well. So I think the greatest weapon against stress in our daily world is our ability to choose one thought over another. And this is exactly where mindfulness helps. Cognition, I think there's a lot of science which shows that mindfulness improves our cognitive ability and leads typically to better decision-making, more effective collaboration among teams. That's helpful. And imagination, I think we need to go a bit deeper into brain science, so to speak. Mindfulness fosters compassion and non-judgment, and that helps to arouse typically positive emotional states, which helps us to think in terms of possibilities, dreams, options, and this is exactly what we want. We see great examples with Google, we see examples with SAP. They use these tools to foster creativity and imagination. Then there is the notion about leading others. I think mindfulness fosters general leadership skills. It brings clarity, it brings focus, compassion. It helps to hit the pause button when necessary. And it also triggers collective intelligence. And I guess we will talk about that a bit later. Yeah, on my own journey, I would say mindfulness, indeed, what you said, it's true. I've been practicing meditation for a long time, 15 years, Zen meditation. I'm a big operations guy, and I always say, for me, Zen is the Zen in Kaizen. Yeah. So, and there's really a nice story behind that, but I don't tell it now. It would be too long. But indeed, this is where it's coming from. And I've been doing this for a long, long time. Actually, it helped me to reflect. It gave me clarity, and it provided this notion of simplicity. And this was super important in my own career. In particular, I have to say, I like this notion of a beginner's mind, where we typically say the beginner's mind sees many possibilities. The expert sees only a few. And I think there's a lot of power in this.
That's very true. I really like that. And I think you summarized it very well. It really is a tool which gives you a different perspective of things to operate differently. And I personally, not only myself, I enjoy it, but the feedback I get also from the people working for me and with me is really great in that sense. I think it's a big change driver, which is even more important in the current state where we are in automotive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where a lot of things are very, very challenging, very demanding, very fast paced. We really need something which doesn't slow us down, but grounds us, gives us a clarity to then really, really fast pace forward into the future. So Jan-Philipp, you've been really driving this also in BCG, and you have conducted a big study, I understood, with 200 leaders across industries and also especially executive leaders in the automotive industry. And that was together with Avare. So we had a meeting with, or a panel with Christian Tamjidi on Wednesday. That was great. But tell us a little bit about the study you guys did and some of the findings.
Yeah, as Christian said before, the manager doesn't know all the answers anymore. So we need to foster the collective intelligence of teams. And our hypothesis was that mindfulness strengthens collective intelligence. But I would take a step back in order to share a little bit of the background of collective intelligence. So collective intelligence is basically what individual intelligence, or IQ, is for a person. So it's the ability to consistently solve complex problems as a team. And what you would traditionally think is, in order to create a smart team, you just have to bring a lot of smart people into the room. But there's increasing research, especially driven by the Harvard Center for Collective Intelligence, showing that team's intelligence, respectively collective intelligence, is not correlated to individual intelligence. It's also not correlated to team composition. What it is related or correlated to is emotional intelligence, psychological safety, and then also the ability of, or the diversity, respectively, equality in turn-taking of people. So all these factors that we consider to be soft factors are driving collective intelligence, and none of the hard factors that traditionally are associated with it are actually driving collective intelligence. So what we then saw is, as mindfulness is fostering people's ability to sensing into each other, to truly listening to each other, to show emotional intelligence, we thought, let's try that out with leaders. And as you said, we took 30 leadership teams, many of them of large European automotive companies, one supplier and one OEM. And we practiced mindfulness for 10 weeks with them. This is work that Awaris did. And then before and after, we did these tests in order to measure the leadership team's collective intelligence. And we measured, for example, their creativity by they were building a small Lego town in very close constraints. And we did that before and after. And what we found is, after 10 weeks of mindfulness, they had a 13% increase in collective intelligence. And that goes down to factors like better judgment, increased output of the leadership team, better creativity, and strengthened moral reasoning. So what we basically found is that mindfulness indeed is the quality to really listen to diverse perspectives in teams with the intent to truly understand and not to answer immediately. And I think that's the core power of mindfulness that it can bring to teams.
That is fantastic. I mean, again, if I reflect on my own domain, automated driving is impacting or affecting around 80% of the entire vehicle, right? From the body domain to chassis, powertrain, electrics, electronics, 80% of the entire product. And if you then think you have to bring all these domain experts, these, this cross-functional, interdisciplinary people together to listen to each other, make sure that we don't cause issues down the line or we forget certain interfaces, both mechanical, electrical, and software as well, that this is so important so we avoid all this rework. Now, we talked a lot about this. So Jan-Philipp, what do you think about, shall we do like a practice or you can show a little bit what you have done with the senior leaders in that study for our audience?
Sure, let's take an experiment, or let's do an experiment and practice a meditation together. And before we do that, basically in the study, we practice two types of meditation. The one is an attention practice, which you would typically use whenever you need convergence thinking. So you have a lot of ideas and you have to find one specific solution. It's very linear and it's about focus and being able to be stable on one object of focus. And then the other type of meditation we did with the leaders is awareness practice. And that is much more open-minded. It's about seeing interconnections and it's about divergent thinking. So about creating new and more ideas. And I would like to do with you an attention practice, which helps for convergence thinking. That's also something, exactly this practice that you could do with a team before there's decisions to make, for example. So I would invite you, if you're in a safe environment right now, maybe you're sitting on a chair, to straighten your back and find a posture of what I call relaxed alertness. So your body is very alert and present, but at the same time, you can let go and can be relaxed. Your legs are ideally not crossed, and then your hands, you can put them palms down on your knees. Or if you're more comfortable, you can also put the right hand below the left one and then put them into your lap. And now take a few deep breaths. You can just connect to your breathing and sense how it flows into your nostrils, how it fills up your belly and your chest, and then how it flows out again. While you're doing this, you can either close your eyes if you're comfortable, or just let your gaze rest downwards. Now you might notice sensations of breathing in the area of your belly. Whenever you're breathing in, your belly expands and then contracts again. And you might also notice your breathing in the area of your chest. It rises with every in-breath and then falls again. And then you might also, just perhaps, notice your breathing in the area of your nostrils. Maybe you sense your breath touching your upper lip, for example. And now just sense your breath in the area where it's most easy to sense it, either on your belly, your chest, or your nostrils. Just pick one spot. And now let's just be silent for a few breaths. Just notice when your breath is starting. Notice a little pause between in and out breath. And then try to pinpoint the moment where your out breath ends. And after a few seconds, you might realize that it's not that easy to intentionally focus on your breathing, and thoughts might enter your mind. You might get carried away a bit. And whenever that happens, that's really the opportunity to practice attention. And once you've catched yourself being distracted, then just gently return back your focus back on that spot that you picked. For example, breathing sensations on your belly. So just let the thought flow by, like you would imagine a leaf floating down a river. And then come back to your breathing. And now just for another 20 seconds, we are practicing that, focusing on the breathing and returning back once we are distracted by a thought. And then you can gently move your body again, wriggle your fingers, and come back to this discussion that we're having with Christian and Parham. Thank you for joining this small experiment.
Thank you very much, Jan-Philipp. I think we keep forgetting the mind and body connection as we're trying to always just solve problems and run around from meeting to meeting. Well, in fact, nowadays it's just connecting from one meeting to the other via Skype, Teams, and Zoom, and all these tools. So really appreciate it. Now, of course, I've been now practicing for many years. I've been seeing it, how it supports me. I introduced it into my previous organization in Jaguar Land Rover as well, and it was, because of exactly the example I just mentioned, so required that you bring these practices and this way of thinking in. But I'm sure a lot of people now ask themselves, how do I start to practice myself as a leader? And especially, how do I introduce these habits and tools into my organization? So, Jan-Philipp, do you have some tips you can share with the attendees?
Yeah, we just practiced a dedicated attention practice, and that takes maybe 3 to 5 minutes to start. And you can do that every morning after waking up, for example. And that helps you to be more structured and focused throughout the day. More specifically, if you have less time and if you are jumping from one meeting to the other, I would recommend to start testing with micro practices. And a micro practice is basically, for everybody who's working in an agile environment, a minimum viable product of your attention practice. And that is, you take the least amount that it takes to bring you back and to connect with your body. For example, 3 conscious breaths. And then you build that into a habit loop. And the habit loop has a cue, a micro practice, and a reward. And one habit loop could be the one that I use personally. Whenever you click Zoom or enter web conference, then take 3 breaths. So the web conference is your cue. The 3 conscious breaths is your micro practice. And then ideally, if you want to integrate that into your nervous system, that experience, take a big smile or reward yourself. Maybe have a small snack that you're eating. And by that, your nervous system, next time you're entering a webinar or Zoom conference, will remember that micro practice and will do 3 conscious breaths again. Another one is whenever I walk through a door, when I touch the door handle, I recognize how it feels to touch that door handle very consciously, and then reward myself by a big smile again. So you can just write down your personal micro practice. It takes 20 seconds and you can do that throughout your day.
That's great. I think that's what people would call kind of life hacks, directly out of kind of the positive psychology handbook. Christian, now, and senior and executive leaders, they probably ask themselves as well and say, how can I adopt these practices? I'm influencing hundreds and hundreds of people in my organization, outside of my organizations, customers, suppliers, stakeholders. Do you have some tips how they can engage this?
Yeah, well, to start with, I have to say, it's sometimes the leaders themselves that resist the new approaches. And I think the reason for that, it feels a bit soft, and they ask themselves the question of, do I still display authority? So for them, it's a bit difficult to move from this tell and sell approach to ask and listen, and maybe adopting this new experiments with mindfulness. And mindfulness, when we look at companies, I would say at times it's even regarded exotic at best. And I'm not sure that all boardrooms are ready and see mindfulness something more than just improving well-being. And we have so many good examples. We talked about Google, we talked about SAP. There are many companies which are applying that successfully. To give you personal example. I was running one of the workshops similar to what Jan-Philipp just did with private equity company, and they were really into the topic and interested. But in the end, they told me, well, I get the experience on a personal level, but can you show me the impact on the numbers now? Yeah, so, and I think this is the big challenge, and this tells a lot. I think what it all comes down to leadership from my perspective. Yeah, we need to, in order to adapt, I think, new habits, what Jan-Philipp also was talking about, we need a new leadership style and we need new role models. I think that's super important, because when people are in doubt, and this is the area of being in doubt with so many challenges, typically they copy behavior of others, in particular leaders. So the more important is that leaders model and display new behavior. I think that's super, super important. So the model of the hero leader is no likely to work in future. I think in future leaders every leader needs to regard himself as a people manager, I think. Yeah, so, and leaders need to be much more playful and open to experiments. That is what I said before. And they should start with small experiments. Don't start the huge mindfulness initiative next week. Start with small initiatives, make it successful, and then scale up. Yeah? And that could be mindfulness, that could be new experiments with leadership styles, everything. But I feel in this time of disruption, technology, and algorithm, I think this time calls for leadership more than ever. It's super important.
That's a very good point. And making examples of other things which today we take for granted, for example, jogging. Many, many decades ago, if you would go jogging, people think you're crazy. Yeah, well, what are you doing? You're running around. But nowadays we have just adopted it. We know how good it is. Lots of other exercises too. And I fully agree with you. Having now been in this industry for a while, in this high technology, high pace area with a lot of uncertainty, I really can say and also really recommend to the audience, there needs to be a different, not a totally different approach to the way we run our businesses, but a different approach towards people leadership, self-leadership as well. So I couldn't agree more with that. Now we're coming towards the end of the discussion. So I would be interested to understand maybe from you two, what's next? What's next for the subject? Maybe what's next for some of the research? For some of the findings. Jan-Philipp, do you want to tell us a little bit, maybe from your perspective, what's next? What are you excited about in this subject?
Yeah, I think we're really just before a time that is the conveyor belt in production, I think. Because if you look how we are structuring production, we have done that extremely well since Ford. And we have basically break down a huge complex problem into very meticulous small work items that we can then just execute. So production works pretty well. If we look at the state of knowledge work, of creativity, of that what engineers do in an automotive company, what's the conveyor belt in that? The problem is we cannot structure it from the outside, so we have to structure it from the inside. And I think mindfulness is a little bit what the conveyor belt is in production for people who work in knowledge work. It helps them leading themselves, choosing one thought over the other, doing one task before the other, not multitasking, not being distracted, but doing the thing that I actually wanted to, or intended to do, plus with the awareness practices, also helping ourselves to think more freely. And I think that notion will get into companies more and more. And I think specifically we will design our workplaces around principles of mindfulness. We might not call it like that, but I think the principles of mindfulness, or how I usually explain it, is it's a combination of attention, awareness, and acceptance. And these three capabilities is what we can train by mindfulness. Attention is the ability to focus on one thing. So how do we design workplaces and environments around being able to focus? Maybe we take out the internet cable from 8 to 12 in the morning so that engineers can focus. Then awareness, it's about being able to track and explore emotions as they come and go. So having that beginner's mind. How can we create spaces for people where they can be the beginner with many ideas rather than the expert with one idea? So doing practices for divergent thinking, awareness practices. And then the last thing, acceptance. we know by now that thoughts and emotions are intensifying the more we push or we pull them. So if we are having a difficulty at work, then we try to mentally push it away, and it just comes back bigger and bigger, that problem. So how do we actually learn to fully let go and to accept our environment? And we can do that by implementing micro practices into the team. Like everybody before the meeting, 1 minute, shares 1 or 2 words that's on top of their mind right now. And by that, we help people let go of thoughts and emotions and only then dive into the topic. So in short, I think mindfulness, I'm very excited about what's happening in the workplace around that, because I think it is the conveyor belt for knowledge work. And we will probably see workplaces being structured around attention, awareness, and acceptance much more than in the past. And I'm very excited about that happening.
Thank you very much. And I couldn't agree more with you. I think just that, BCG is engaged in the subject also shows, of course, the industry leaders that this is moving away from the traditional application of things like mindfulness, much more in a more tangible and business area where you're using neuroscience and psychology to prove that in the end of the day, a very simple approach works. But I can just also emphasize the fact it is not just this one practice we just did, right? There are many, many different practices. But what I love the most is that there is science behind that, which proves frameworks, tools, which we can use as business leaders. We love to put some KPIs behind things and track things, but then also emphasizing the fact that it can't happen overnight. Yeah. Same as we can't just push the button and deploy agile overnight. We know that all by now. This takes many, many years, takes a cultural change, is a transformation, people, processes, tools being put together. So very excited about this, and really want to thank you to leading the way in this regard. Christian, now from a senior leadership and executive leadership point of view, we talked about some of the behaviors and traits, but what do you really see being the leadership skills we need in the future, and especially now thinking again back to kind of the decade of action of the Sustainable Development Goals? What do you desire of leaders to be like and to practice and to represent so that we can achieve the goals?
Yeah. First of all, I'm with Jan-Philipp. I think we are just at the very beginning and seeing a tiny little part of the change that is going to come. As I described in what I said before, I feel leadership will change in a dramatic way, away from this command and control, much more to a listening leader. And the good thing is, and that makes me super optimistic, we see that change already happening in many organizations. And I feel the challenges around us, what we see right now, they are even accelerating this development. And this makes me super optimistic. And maybe to tell another anecdote, what happened recently on the particular notion of mindfulness and corporate mindfulness, where I'm also super optimistic, because I feel we are just seeing the tiny little effect that can be much, much more if we really apply it on a broader base. I was recently invited to a webinar featuring Nico Rosberg, the Formula 1 champion and successful sustainability entrepreneur today. And he is an active meditator, so really counting on meditation. And his message was loud and clear and went out to hundreds of executives that mindfulness has been the secret of his success in sport and today in business. And you can imagine this was music to my ears, because this is the message we need much more of these type of messages. So I'm sure this new leadership styles, whatever you call it, new leadership, coaching style, whatever, and mindfulness, they will continue to find its way in corporations, maybe at different speeds here and there, that can be, but I fully believe they will contribute to transform the business world for the better. And in particular, with mindfulness and corporate mindfulness, I believe it's here to stay.
Thank you very much, Christian. That's a super important message to give to everybody, and also show some leaders and role models here in this area, of which surely you are one of them. So really admire the work you're doing for the business community here. I also can just emphasize the fact that this is really here to stay. In fact, when I started this many years ago, a lot of people said to me, "Well, you're engaged in this autonomous driving space. Why the heck are you doing this?" And similar to what you said, if I'm not present, I'm wasting my time and the time of my people, and I can really not afford this. It is very important to find the right partners. This is really what I can encourage the attendees and the listeners to be aware of, take into account. Really, it needs a partner to start this journey who's founded in business, who's founded in the science behind all of this. And here, I think the entire kind of mindfulness coaching community still is evolving and learning. So I'm pretty sure, together with what you are doing, together with what Avaris is doing, this is, I believe, really setting the tone in the industry. So with that, I want to thank you too for this, and really appreciate your time, and happy to take some questions now or offline, of course, as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
And thank you all. It was a great session, a wonderful routine. I hope other people sort of actually participated like I did. We are out of time, which is a shame, but thanks again. We hope to see you again. And yeah, that was really good. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.